development, and have kind of a experience with 3D audio and VR. So it's me.
Hey guys, Jeb Terry, Fox Sports Digital. Working a lot of our multi-screen activations with league partners and how we present our sports content on digital screen with emerging tech, social, digital, and every way we can get our content in front of the fan base.
Dylan Shaw. I'm here with Virtually Live. Our company's focused on true VR for live sports events, basically taking live data from different tracking companies and transposing that into a complete replica of the event. So I'll be here to talk about kind of product side.
Hi, I'm Warren Zen. I'm the managing director of Havas Media's Mobex Group, which is the Havas Media's mobile unit. And our role is to oversee all the client investments in the mobile space from a media marketing perspective and help bring the best possible way in which they can reach consumers via the mobile channel.
All right, thank you. And today we'll just go ahead and get started. So with mobile, VR, and AR, consumers are most understanding of these two platforms out of the entire industry so far with Google Cardboard, Samsung VR, Pokemon Go, even Snapchat. So how can companies and content creators leverage this understanding as the first emerging platform to get going into full immersive VR?
All right, yeah, sure, happy to take it. Yeah, so a lot of the challenges around, I think, VR 360, however you want to call it from our perspective, is reaching scale and finding the audience, getting in front of them. We all know that headset distribution is limited at this time. It's starting to improve every quarter, right? We're getting great numbers about the audience there, but from our perspective, we have to make sure we create content that can be consumed by the masses, and so that's making sure it's viewable on all the various screens. So optimizing for not only the Cardboard or Samsung VR, but also for the 360 experience via Facebook and YouTube platforms, the 360 player. The magic window where you can take your camera and essentially look around and experience that flat rendering of a 360 video. And so as we look at it, it's making sure that experience is equally impressive to the consumer so that they can essentially taste it and want to come in for more and find more of this content around. So it's critically important from our perspective that experience, what might be their first experience that they get to go to the 360 or VR kind of content, is a good one. So it's how we're reaching scale and how we're introducing our fans to the medium.
I'd echo Jeb on the point that this is oftentimes one of the entry points into panning around or kind of even thinking about 3 degrees of looking around a sphere, right, in terms of content. So it's really important that content creators that are focused on 360 video focus on high quality production, but of course, production's at a premium right now at this state, and what I'd add as a caveat is we want to make sure that at Virtually Live, that all virtual reality or 360 experiences are, high quality ones. So that means, not being able to see stitch lines, but more importantly, thinking about the way that you can actually step into an experience. So moving around and truly feeling like you're present in a location. So what we do as kind of a comparison is basically transport people into a completely rendered environment, which is essentially modeled by our team to be pretty much a replica of the event, and thereby allowing that person to have a little bit more interactivity and engagement.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going in a linear fashion here, but I was just going to say, from kind of what I've seen in the media, the music landscape in particular, it's I don't know if it's much about taking advantage as it is kind of getting ready and experimenting, and creating programs that might even sit in the can or in the vault until such time as there's a handset that's out there that's penetrated in a big way or that rights have cleared. I mean, I think it's broadly, from what I've seen in media, more of a time of experimentation and testing balloons, if you will, for what could be a new medium, basically.
You touched on something interesting around the rights perspective, right? Especially when you the music or live sports rights, or mobile versus tablet versus web versus PC, whatever it may be, and kind of the VR, the 360. This is kind of not categorized yet, right? So understanding, is this a mobile highlight versus a new media type highlight, or is it, where is that content being consumed has a big role in our industry right now.
Yeah, I don't know. First thing be to discover what mobile is. It's changed. It's not the same thing it used to be. It's very device-centric when people talk about mobile, but it's become digital in a way because everything is going through this channel now, so it's not distinct from normal digital channels anymore. And then the other thing that we're dealing with, the reality is that if you look at it from a technological perspective, a mobile device only has this ability to render a certain level of experience at this point, right? It's limited. If you really want to look at the experiences in the way that they can be developed these days, you need to have hardware that can provide the level of, rates, motion rates and bit rates and pixelation in order to make it work. It's not here yet. So right now, the Google goggles or the Google Glass or whatever the case is, the cardboards and the Samsung devices that are coming out, they offer an interesting experience that's scalable, but the kind that are promised, it's not there yet. And I think that that's part of where the mobile end of this is going to meet a nexus point when maybe there's such thing as a 5G network. I'm not really sure what that means yet. There's a lot of talk about it, but it's not clear. And then when the hardware becomes even faster, we'll be able to see things on here that I think are approximate what you can see on like an Oculus or a Vive. And until then, I think to the point we're making is it's probably going to be social interactions and deep video and like the 360 video where these things can maybe provide a little bit of a more immersive experience. But right now, we work with companies where in order to scale, the only way we can scale is by sending out a Google Cardboard because everyone's got a phone. And we know that we have a limitation in terms of what we can deliver in that device. So in that respect, you do the best you can without also having to ask people to make what we call unnatural behaviors. Having to put a goggle on and put a phone in a thing. I mean, it's a lot of work to have someone do these things. So at the point at which we can move away from those things and make it easier, I think that's when things will get scaled. So we're kind of in a weird nexus where the idea is good, but we haven't really got to execute at scale yet.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, as we look at, is how do we get this content in front of the consumers without making them jump through hoops to engage, right? It's the notion of how do we present this in their feed, in their natural kind of daily routine to where they can experience. And Facebook 360, YouTube 360, and I'm sure others are coming out, help us do that, right? And not only does it introduce the medium to them, but it has, in certain occasions, brought a certain scale where it starts to matter a little bit. Whether it's being stage side where Conor McGregor's at a weigh-in, right? When he and Nate Diaz fight on stage, if we can clip that, turn around, and get it up in real time, that becomes something that makes people stop the scroll and pay attention, right? And so we can actually get scale within the notion of hundreds of thousands, millions of views and engagements on something like that, right? It's not necessarily the fully immersion yet, but it's the tip of the spear. And so that's where mobile becomes really important for us too.
I think you're touching on a really interesting point there, which is, I think that there's some sectors out there that one can learn from. Like, when I've been at a bunch of VR-oriented events around the country the last year, and it feels to me broadly like it's like a cousin of the gaming business in some way. The gamers are probably closer to this universe than others from everything from the business models of subscriptions or in-app purchasing to just the gaming engines being built off Unity 3D, for example, which seems like it's the, emerging platform. So I tend to look at that as, maybe you can learn from that somehow and build your own,
Right. So I'll jump in here because obviously our product, because it's rendered with computers, we're using graphics engine technology like you're referring to, Seth. So Unity and Unreal and other graphics engines. But what's possible is to actually do a 360 stream to a mobile device that's rendered using those engines, right? So a mobile phone can have, albeit more limited like you're saying and less immersive like you're saying as well, still a compelling experience where you're being a little bit more passive and it's a little bit more curated, right? So for a specific example, when you think about our partnership at Virtually Live with Formula E, right? So we have two settings. One is a passive experience where you're kind of shown into the different areas around the actual event. So that would be the pit lane or the VIP area or the actual cars themselves. Or you can be unguided, right? Which is what we call where you can kind of transport around yourself with one of the higher end systems. So what you're getting is the more guided version. on a mobile device, right? Something more curated.
Yeah, what I'm seeing in the world I'm in, right, so we have a lot of clients who are brand marketers. They're always looking for ways to outbeat their competition by creating a really cool new experience. Their problem is consumers today are overwhelmed with different types of mediums. They're just overstimulated. Most markets they're going after are younger audiences who are the most overstimulated. And they're also the most savvy, so they may be the ones who are most prone to wanting to experience these type of things. But as Jeb said, it's a lot of it's unnatural behavior, having to put on a headset. So the ways that we're seeing the innovation is coming from industries where there's, we'll call it like almost like addictive behaviors, like gaming, where people will sit down in front of a computer for a day and they'll play a game and they're willing to invest whatever they can to make their rig give them the best possible experience, and they'll put headsets on, they'll do whatever they can do to make that more realistic. And so because there's a hunger there and there's a demand there, the industry develops in those markets. That's where we learn a lot. And I'll say it, the porn industry is also one where we learn a lot too. The fact is that the streaming video stuff all came from that particular industry because there's just a lot of invested in it. So we see that stuff fall off now into, we'll call it, less addictive or less immersive markets where someone's just watching a passive commercial. Right? It's very difficult to get somebody to participate in a commercial message in 3D unless they're already in a 3D experience. So the Facebooks of the world, the Googles of the world who have the money and they have the infrastructure and they have the scale, as they advance their capabilities, everybody else will follow. So I think we're seeing where, particularly Facebook, obviously Zuckerberg's investments recently in Google's are showing where these two things are headed. And right now, we're pretty much in the 360 video world with ad units that you can kind of look around and do something really neat in, That's about where we're at. And sometimes we'll see installations at live events like this where someone will put on a pair of glasses and look at things. I'd say, my opinion is we're probably 10 years away from VR being like a scalable medium, right? But we'll see a lot of stuff in the sectors like education, training, probably some enterprise, and like as I said, certainly entertainment and gaming will be probably the forefront.
One of the things when you mentioned gaming and the insatiable appetite to plug in and play for a day, on the sports side of things, we're fortunate. We have that insatiable appetite.
Huge too,
right?
no doubt.
Fans
My
wanna
brother will
consume.
watch football from 9 in the morning till midnight on a Sunday.
Oh, that, right?
Like
But-
just with chips next to him, It's
But one of the challenges that we look at is that the 60-inch TVs are so good,
Yeah.
right? And the broadcast is so good that how do you get somebody's attention to, one, first go immersive and then ignore everybody else they're watching the game with, right? Which is, sports is by nature a social action of watching the game, right? So how do we find the better medium or the better presentation and make it more of a, maybe a companion programming or something along that? And that's kind of where we're trying to look at is how do we give fans different viewpoints, right? How can we transport them from their pockets, right? And go behind and see the end zone or go to the 50 or come to the crowd. How do we leverage things like Unity to build cool suites, but then actually show the broadcast there and let them jump around while also being with friends and doing things like that. So, I mean, it's like a combination of everybody. We get a lot of the benefit and a lot of the challenges of each of our industries.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think one of the things, I've seen from music is, or maybe other media sectors too, there's this tendency to kind of view these new platforms as just something that's part of an ancillary market. It's the same as a home entertainment or a TV reproduction, and you're just going to dump it. So in the recorded music sector, Vivo, for example, which is a classic music video portal, just exists to stream videos, and they're just videos. I mean, they do have original programming, but, I don't tend to look at VR as that for every segment. I think there'll be stuff that gets created that makes a hell of a lot of sense for the medium itself, actually. I don't know what that is. I mean, there's a Paul McCartney 360 that I'll point to that you're on stage with him and it's a very different experience than streaming something even on Twitter or Periscope, actually, which I think is also worthwhile to mention. So.
Well, that's how you would scale a concert with mobile, right? So we've all experienced this where, Van Halen's only playing 3 nights. I'm not spending $500 for a ticket and standing up in the back with a bunch of kids. So, but I still want to see Van Halen. So if I could buy a Ticketmaster pass on my phone, and I can be there live and watch the concert with someone who's responsible for carrying me around on stage and doing stuff. It might actually be a better experience because I have access to that experience that I'd never get for the ticket price that I pay unless I have a backstage pass. So I think that the live concert experience, and we're experimenting with this with some people we're working with in the States now, in New York, that I think would be a big marketplace. I would sign up for this because there's, and that you could do that through a mobile device.
And that's where you need the audio too, right?
Yeah,
That's where
totally.
the 3D audio matters.
Absolutely. That the
Right.
sound is a really important part of that.
If you're going, especially if you're going down the path of music, right?
No
Live
doubt.
Music events, and I'm in the same camp where sometimes it's nice to just be able to have a night to myself to like do my own thing. But going it back to Jeb's point, which is essentially, you know, with sports, it's a thing where you want to be with somebody else. You want to talk trash. You want to be able to watch. You know, if you're going head to head with somebody in fantasy and you have Sunday night and like nobody's with you and you're just accompanied by a bag of chips, our view at Virtually Live is to really hopefully put you like really in the stadium or on the field, right? Like using a game engine. So.
I imagine a guy in his living room alone with a lighter, you know,
Well,
you know, like
Watching a concert.
Fire
So,
alarms.
so what do all of these live event experiences in VR need to kind of push that over the edge from, you know, just another media experience to something that's better than reality? What is that next step that's needed?
I mean, I think the hardware, the capture needs to continue to improve, right? I mean, live stitching is a challenge, right? At high quality, especially in 3D, right? Because you don't have to stitch here, you have to stitch all the way to the back of the room, and there's moving parts. And, you know, sports, there's a lot of moving people, there's a lot of challenges around that. So I think that's one of the biggest things. If we want to get fully immersive 3D live streaming, you know, the hardware needs to continue to improve. And it is, like at a clip like we've never seen before, right? It's the capture and the stitch in the cloud that's going to make that experience really, really, you know, exciting.
And then on the content production side, like just for the 360 video notes, right? Like there's things like don't put the camera so close to somebody, right? Because like if I'm a viewer, I've definitely done some 360 video shots where it's uncomfortable because I have more of a guy kind of fidgeting with his phone than I do like an actual sporting event or an actual subject, right? I think going off your point, like close field, like maybe boxing, or for instance, if you're close to a golf hole for sports, like you will get really good high quality content that people will want to look around. But it's also about composition.
Yep.
Yeah, technology is the issue. I fully agree. We're just not there. You know, there's so many different components in the chain of production, from bit rates to video speeds to Wi-Fi to processors to camera types, and in this whole ecosystem, technological ecosystem, you know eventually that someone's going to come up with this entire full-through like capacity, but until then, there's a lot of players that are going to keep on trying to fix different pieces. So I don't know if everyone remembers this movie called Brainstorm. It was with Christopher Walken. It was like in the late 80s. It was a movie about this guy that invented this headset that you can like actually be inside of somebody's mind. And I remember the way they did it, it was like this, the original version of the machine was this big thing, you know, the guy had to put it on, like 6 guys had to put it on him. And they showed how they kept shrinking it down to the point that it was just like something you put on the head, you know. And that was the point they could roll this thing out and start to scale it. And I think that's the same thing. Eventually we're going to see some way, probably a Google goggle / phone thing where all the infrastructure is in place that these things will be scalable. But, you know, the plethora of technological innovations and companies are going to come out with products between now and then are going to come and go. We're going to see a lot of ups and downs, no different than videotape or DVD technologies. So we're kind of all anxiously waiting for this thing to happen. In the meantime, again, like I said before, it'll probably be some of these big players like the Googles and the Facebooks and the gaming industry that'll probably push a lot of this stuff forward.
But I would just say, you know, maybe it's not a direct answer to your question, but if you look at the kind of just aggregate amount of content or apps that have been built for this new medium, it's pretty small, right? It under-indexes compared to other platforms.
yeah.
The number of stuff that's available in the Steam store, the app stores is quite small. So, you know, to me, it may be that there isn't enough stuff that's been published or made yet that really works for the medium. You know, I mean, I look at what happened with Pokemon Go, right, which is, I guess, I don't know if it's augmented reality, it's not the full virtual, as being kind of
Depends on who you
proof,
talk
some
to,
kind of
yeah.
proof of concept out there, right?
Yeah.
That some
No
of the
doubt.
stars are aligned?
Definitely there's a need for it. There is. It was huge. My
So-
wife still plays the damn thing.
So it may not be like the typical definition of, right, augmented reality in terms of, like, if Daiquiri was here, what would they say about if that's augmented reality or not? But you get into like kind of a rabbit hole discussion. The fact of the matter is, there are a lot of people who download it, just like your wife, and use that app for a time being, and now it's a common term, right? Augmented reality is really well known at this point because of Pokemon Go. But at the same time, I think what you have to do is also think about things in the present, right? So like for Virtually Live, we do remind people that this is a simulation, right? Like you might want to take a seat or make yourself comfortable. You see Google announcing comfortable materials with their newest headset. People are making incremental changes, and content creators are also designing these experiences to keep the user in mind on a small scale too.
Well, what's important to note, I think, for those of us especially that are in it, in the industry and are looking at it every day, we all kind of have a jaded view of it, I think, because at times like, that stitch line's not clean, or oh, look at that, I can see that. But then all of a sudden, I put my kids in a headset or even Google Cardboard or something like that, and it just blows their minds, right? And so the potential is so there, right? And technology is speeding up and getting there fast, very fast. So it's just important for us to always have perspective on this kind of, not cottage industry, but for what it is that it's come a long way and it's going to keep going that way fast.
And something that we keep mentioning is scalability. So, every developer out there right now wants to know, how do we make money off of VR and AR? Something that we have talked about a little bit is, how do we get the advertisers involved? How do we get advertising funding to be spent on VR and AR experiences?
I'd say we shouldn't. I don't want advertisers involved. Then it'll become like 3D, pre-roll, which is going to be a horrible thing. And it's probably going to happen because that's just the way the industry goes. But the advertiser-funded model is kind of a, one of these heroin addictions that the industry end up with, because we are forced to have other types of content interfere with the experience that people want. And it's inevitable. I'm a realist. My industry my company makes all of its money on this. So I'm a proponent of getting the word out there about products and services. But there's a point where I think that what we're seeing already, we have companies come into our building and do all these vendor demos. One guy came in and said virtual reality programmatic ads, where like they can build a network of VR portals, and they can push ads into them that are 360 videos. And the idea just depressed me, because this is not the right way to create an experience where we can maybe learn a bit how the original internet model of using banner ads and stuff was not a good idea, but it worked for people who made a lot of money. So we seem to be replicating these same monetization models, and I'd like to see a different model. I'd like to see where we create a new paradigm of how advertisers can participate in ways that don't create disruption and awful, people are going to get ad blockers on their VR devices, soon, which will happen, right? So I think the answer is, I don't know. I suspect that financial entropy will force an outcome, which maybe not be great, but I'm hopeful that the industry takes a pause and decides to look at it a bit differently, so that we don't end up with an experience like that.
Well, yeah, okay, I was just going to say, I'd kind of suggest to look at it a little more broadly. One example is this European company called Blipper, which is here, in San Francisco as well.
Know them very well.
Yeah.
Got the
I
app
think
on my
they're-
phone.
They're a good example, actually. It's not pure VR, but it's, they've done stuff with Coke or Pepsi bottle cans. Everyone goes out with the code, and, you redeem it. It leads you to, an AR or VR, an AR experience on the handset, basically. And they've done this around lots of different consumer products. So, that to me is clearly some example of an advertising economy. It's not exactly what we're talking about. I mean, last year here upstairs, they had, I think it was McDonald's Happy Meal app that was virtual reality. You go in and, you interact with, which to me seems kind of ludicrous, quite frankly. But
It's just, there's no scale there,
Right.
I mean, I think it's cool. I've played with Blipper stuff, and I know those guys, and when you actually get the experience, it is neat. But how many people are going to do it? right? It's just kind of hard to get the scale that an advertiser needs
Yeah,
to.
well, there's a lot of
right?
Coke cans and cereal boxes. I mean,
How many
it's-
people are gonna pick up the
Maybe
thing?
not as many, the redemption,
Right.
I agree with you. What I would probably say is just, again, not exactly, but look at the gaming business. It's more about, freemium, in-app purchasing, driving
that's it.
driving revenues around the feature of the programming. It's not advertising, actually.
Well, I think the industry, both the creators, the buyers, the advertisers, everybody needs to have a new tab on their spreadsheet that says VR, right? And like, you can't have the same variables that come out to the same equation, right? And yeah, there might be scale, that might not be the scale you're necessarily looking for from a immersion standpoint, but there's also earned media and different ways to achieve scale through creating either a product or content so unique that industry talks about it, right? That it's more of it's a story about the partnership, the opportunity, and it's the longer tail of that media where I think you can reach a different level of scale. It's not the same, we're not gonna try to lie to each other and say it's the exact same thing, but there's opportunity there to do that. And understanding that, a CPM is gonna be different for what this VR experience is. It's just something that we all have to accept and understand where that intangible value is that you're getting through this brand association, through being first to these experiences, and through maybe associating with events like concerts or sports that you might not be able to go to a traditional buy at menu or on broadcast, but there might be some lower hanging fruit in the VR space, which makes it a more interesting association, right? And so it's kind of like, we always have to evolve, especially on the business side of things, and understanding that we have to move in this industry as well.
So yeah, I mean, just turn back to the OC3, the Oculus Connect 3 announcements with some of the demos that, Mark Zuckerberg put on a headset and had this kind of social interaction where you saw what we like to call and what Greenlight calls mixed reality, right? Where you had a FaceTime moment between his wife and himself while he was in VR, and his virtual avatar was there represented. So what we think at Virtually Live will really drive forward all of the monetization is eventually social. At some point, you need to be able to say, okay, like now I can be at a sports event or a music event with my father who like loves the Dallas Cowboys but might not have somebody to watch that game with. I'd love to be with his avatar in a VIP box. Why not? I mean, inside of our app at Virtually Live, you have a VIP area that you can go to, which is generally, speaking to the point of price, inaccessible to a great many people. So I think ultimately social.
We have to be realistic about like the avatars,
Yeah.
stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
like, if it's just a blob sitting next
Right.
to you,
Right.
in a suite, that's not compelling.
Correct,
Like,
but
it's-
if you look at the technology going forward,
Yeah.
talk about gaze tracking, right? Like being able to track your pupils or gesticulate with input controllers, right? So that you can see someone's hands and see someone's eye movements. I think that's actually pretty compelling.
Yeah, if I'd say I believe that a way to go would be to go the sponsorship model, where instead of brands, and now brought to you by kind of thing, it's more the brand, most brands, good brands anyway, have a story, they have a point of view, they have a personality, they have a perspective, a sensibility, good brands that established are. And you can create content around that brand that is immersive and creative. Like you said, it doesn't feel like you're watching an ad, you're watching some cool thing that's brought to you by an ad or that's immersed inside of a brand personality or brand message. And I think that's, my opinion is where I think the opportunities are going to lie for like a Pepsi, or brands who have this type of modality and think that way. Because I'd rather be immersed in an experience where Pepsi sponsors something to take me somewhere special or do something neat for me. It could either be brought to you by Pepsi or it could be about the brand in some way. But that's an opportunity, right? Where if the story and the content is rich enough, people will participate in it, and they'll have both a win-win where the consumer feels they got value and the advertiser was able to create a relationship with the consumer. That's missing. I think that's a missing, and I think that's the promise of this medium, is that it could do that better than anyone can, and I hope so. That there's more of that, because I think that's the way it'll work.
And something that's been very big this month and last month between Oculus Connect and then through Tim Cook talking about AR for Apple as well. There's been a huge talk about social integrations in VR and AR. So especially with live events, we've touched on this. But what are some things that you foresee in 2020? What will social interaction and virtual reality look like?
So, yeah, I mean, essentially, you're looking at a mixed or multiple modality experience where you're being able to watch, broadcast TV while also sitting inside of, an experience with some representation of somebody else, right? You have your family or your friends, and you're at your favorite sports or live music event, and you're able to look at them and see eye contact and do other social things like travel down to a specific area with voice over IP. You can talk to one another, things like this. It's just a convergence of many different types of interaction.
Well, what I think is interesting, the way the prosumer devices are going, like the Ricos, the Samsungs, the smaller devices of the world, being able to take somebody with me somewhere, right, and being able to stream that. Like maybe 2020, so 4 years from now, maybe that's somewhere it goes where if I have a great seat to a game, all of a sudden I can take you with me, where you can actually see and experience, right? There's some application there. I think in the very near future, though, it's interacting in the virtual space, right? But as hardware improves and streaming capabilities improve, I think it's going to be more of a transportable type of experience where you can achieve presence through this medium.
I think social media is as addictive as gaming. So if there's any other industry or sector that's ripe for VR, AR, it's social media. Similar to gaming, people will spend all day in chat rooms and, troll people and stuff like that. And so I think if you look at the construct of social platforms with, like I said, groupings and chat rooms and specialized, enthusiast groups and, interest parameters and such, it's tailor-made for a VR experience because you can actually go now into these rooms and you can actually interact with people. If anything, I think, interestingly, social media probably is being held back on its full potential because we can't touch each other and sit down next to each other. That's what people actually do want to do when they're doing this stuff. So I think I could totally see why Zuckerberg is investing in this, because my guess is, I'm probably not brilliant for thinking this at all, is he wants to turn Facebook into a virtual community where people can log in and they can go where they want, roam around and have the same thing and troll each other, whatever. And I think that's going to be a huge place for this. I'm surprised it's not yet there. Remember Second Life?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, and that was weird. I mean, I did it once. It was the strangest thing. I was walking around. No one wanted me in any room. They were like, get out of here, But I remember thinking, like, this is really weird. But those guys were really ahead of their time. They knew what they were doing. It didn't work out. But that's what I believe Facebook's going to become. And I think social media will become, in fact, an immersive experience where you have an avatar. You can be other people, you can look different, and it's a little creepy.
You can look at the way that Snap Inc. and Facebook are kind of already moving towards that live shared experience. They're creating that ecosystem of products, right? So I think it definitely will be that. And if you look at High Fidelity, which is actually right the evolution of the company you mentioned, right? So they are doing that sort of virtual space with Virtually Live. That's here and now with our partner Formula E. They're trying to reach a tech-forward demographic that is willing to see the race through this different medium and actually be with other fans. So I think that's another thing, right, is that you're with like-minded people in these spaces.
I think that, we talked about the enterprise, which is different just from commercial media, is part of this. And I think I've seen some kind of cause-oriented programming that isn't going to necessarily chart on broadcast media or with major brands, but has, pretty powerful potential to connect people. I mentioned a company called StoryUp that's in the Midwest in Missouri that's doing a lot of great work just around connecting veterans, actually, that may be injured and can't see each other. Or some of the stuff that's been doing in emerging markets. Clinton's foundation has done something in Africa to show the public schools and how they work there. These are all really different immersive things that connect people in different ways. So I think that's particularly challenging. I don't know if that's a Facebook or it could just be some other entity basically doing it,
So you can download Virtually Live on Steam right now if you have access to any hardware to kind of give this a try yourself. whereby you can actually have controllers and have an avatar and see somebody else. So that came out just recently.
So let's dive into what can brands and developers do today to get into VR? I mean, what's a smart play? Should they go more a 360 route? Should they look at mobile VR and AR? Or should they just bypass all of that and go to the high powered?
I think if brands have the storytellers or can create cool, authentic content around their brand, right, with organic integration and kind of just telling a story, like you were just talking about. I mean, and that's great, and they can achieve scale a lot of different ways in doing that. They can optimize for every platform. Or then it's also, I think, finding ways to associate with things they already want to be associated with, right? Either if it's concerts or if it's sporting events or whatever it may be, there's ways to do that, which is in an organic way, right? That makes sense, and it's not like all of a sudden slapping a pre-roll in front of, like a flat pre-roll in front of a 360 video. Right. It just doesn't make sense that way, right?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm getting calls from, it's interesting, from major record labels basically saying, what do we do about this new medium? We have a new record come out, what is it with VR? Well, what is it exactly? And one of the only things they can really point to integrate it, is, Bon Jovi's got a foundation, and it's doing a really great thing, and maybe we can find some way, whether that's a sponsorship or whoever it might be, to tie it in. It needs to be integrated, basically.
Well, it needs to be evergreen content too, right? I mean, part of the challenges of sports in particular is that it's always a moving cycle, right? And how do you create evergreen content where just, self-discovery matters, where you can come and always watch it? It's something cool. And that's one of the biggest things, is making sure what you're creating, timeliness is great if you get it out really timely, but if it's not, you gotta make sure it's evergreen and either all access and just cool enough to want to come experience all the way, or you're telling a different type of story.
Yeah, it's got to make sense, yeah.
We have this a lot. So we get a lot of brands come to us and say, oh, we want to dip into this. Can you tell us what we should do? We think it's interesting. Usually it's a brand that there's a CMO who's a visionary and he wants to be like the guy and he wants a story written about him and how smart he was,
Can you introduce me to that guy?
Yeah, there's a lot of these guys, they're like, oh, I have a budget and I want to do something innovative, So other times it could be that there's a legitimate, like they see some specific reason that a VR or whatever experience may be of value to them. But the questions that come up are interesting. They're always the same. So the first thing is, okay, so what's the cost to develop the content, right? Which it's not cheap. So then they look at the scale of that. What can we do with that? So if they're going to spend the money on this, which is ostensibly like a TV commercial, then they have to figure out what's a distribution model. How are we going to get that out in front of people? Because if there aren't VR content out there for us to plug it into, then how are people going to see it? And are people, in fact, going to take the time to download a commercial about my brand to watch it? They're not going to be interested in enough. So it stops at that point. So what we usually find works is we ask the client, what's your event schedule? Okay? And most of these big brands have events. They do things where, like a lot of the liquor brands that we work with, they always have events. They have some type of really cool, whether it be a bar thing or it could be some other thing. A lot of these brands spend a lot of money on events. Now, when you have an event that you're sponsoring, you have a closed place where there are a lot of people that are at this event, and you can have a booth where you can set up an additional experience that's really cool. And you can get like just about everybody to do it. You can get everybody getting in a line. No different than sitting in a stupid photo booth and taking a picture of themselves, right? They'll do it. So they go in there and they have this really cool experience. And then what you do from that is when people leave the event, you give them all a Google Cardboard that they can all then download and they can share it with people. Now you've got virality and you've got advocacy. It's a smaller footprint, but it was scale. It was relevant to an event you already have. And if you're doing 6 versions of this event or 20 versions of this, now you've got that at scale. So that's where we are seeing stickiness around this, is that's a smart play for a brand to see where the audience is captivated enough, that they'll participate in it enough, that they can put a lot of PR around it enough to get it to work for them. Because there just isn't a channel for them to push it through right now. So this is like a model that we think makes sense in today's world.
It's got to be context specific. So yeah, whatever the virtual space is or whatever the content is, it needs to be driven based on that event. So for Formula E, for instance, right, we have in November 12th, Marrakesh coming up, right? So fans can, with this app, download it and be at this specific event as it's taking place with other people who are interested in that, in following that event. So I have to bring it back to social, to be honest, because for me, it's all about being able to connect with somebody else around an event that's completely context specific. It's you're modeled that you're like literally in Morocco, right? Because the entire city has been mapped, and that specific area of the track is available to you to move around via teleportation or by walking, right? So it's this incredible experience based around an event.
Do you guys think between, producing viral content and being able to share it on social, do you think social integrations and capabilities are maybe what gets and pushes VR to be mainstream?
I mean, I think it's huge. I mean, I sit in a different part of the country and look out on a very different landscape, and not to, again, deflect your question, but I mean, mobile has always been biggest part of the world I see in the Americas. Mobile's part of the title of this panel, by the way. And, there are often content propositions in this medium that do a lot better because of the way they play to those markets in the mobile medium. And that can be a partnership with an operator, America Mobile, Carlos Slim, who's got 18 operators throughout the Americas and market shares that would not be allowed in this country, by the way. And they can do something, whether it's on a handset or on their mobile deck or through an app garden, that can sometimes really drive things tremendously, basically, on a regional level. So I would just mention mobile as to think about the operators and think about the handsets and the app stores that are out there and what you can do around that, as much as you would the community.
Yeah, I think what takes it mainstream is when we have those social hooks, but the barriers to consumption are nothing, right? I mean, like right now, the reason social means so much is because we can all do it whatever device we're on immediately, right? It's not going to matter if I can share something via social to my friends on whatever platform I choose if they can't experience with it. It's not going to help achieve scale. So as soon as I can send them something and it can happen right now and they can interact with it wherever they are and experience that's when scale happens.
So it's always asynchronous in that context, right? Like you always have to send it to somebody else, right? And they're not experiencing it at the same time as you. But what if you had your social feeds integrated into this space, and you could stand next to each other in the space for the event and read off of your Twitter feed. So for a specific example, Virtually Live with its partners, the Scottish Professional Football League had a demo in which you could be on the field and read tweets from a hashtag, right, a specific hashtag about the event, so that you could actually be updated about what people were talking about synchronously, right? So I think that's a slight point of differentiation as well.
Well, we have about 15 minutes left, so does anyone in the audience have any questions?
They're mesmerized.
Anyone?
We just covered it all.
I'll jump
Come on,
in.
someone can
and,
jump in.
I'll just throw a plug out there for what we're working on right now is our Fox Sports VR app where we're live streaming a lot of major college football events, right? It's on every platform, right? You can interact with it on mobile, right? Without a headset or anything like that, and Magic Window experience. So in the notion of trying to achieve that mobile scale, we're going to make it available wherever you can interact with it. It can do Magic Window, it can do cardboard, and it can do headset. So when we're talking about mobile and ability to consume, it's
An
something we like
operator
to look
would
at.
use it basically as well, it sounds like,
Yeah, exactly right.
We haven't spoken about drones. And drones are now, you can stream drone content right to a phone, right?
Yeah.
So, we work with a company called DJI, which is probably the largest drone maker in the world. And they've developed a VR drone. So I have it on my phone. It's a DJI app, and you just download it, and it connects to the drone, and you can watch the drone footage, and you can do it in 3D. So you can fly around. So this is a whole other realm, okay? So when you think about what these guys are trying to do is they're understanding that this, flight is something that man's tried to achieve forever, right? We figured it out, but we have to sit inside these big metal tubes. So, being able to be in a drone experience where you're buzzing around real estate or you're looking over, landscape or you're surveying, something, and being able to be in that virtually is an incredibly powerful idea. And that's mobile, and that's very real. That's happening right now because As long as the phone and the drone are connected via some Wi-Fi signal, you can get that streamed to you pretty nicely. And I think that when you start to take the additive of some type of a drone or flying mechanism and you add it into the mix of what we're talking about here, now we have a whole other world of opportunity that is also, again, there's a lot of implications to it, because we know that, for example, we know that terror organizations are using drones for surveillance. They're putting bombs on them and stuff like that. So, you've got all this, and the government is using them. And then we have the consumer that just wants to just play around and have a good time. So as this stuff continues to develop, we're seeing an immense amount of opportunities, particularly like in the real estate industry or the travel industry. I mean, if I own a bunch of resorts, what better than 3D mobilized drone footage to show people what the resort is like? Or maybe even if I go to a realtor, I don't have to leave. I can just sit there and they can just say, well, let's go survey the house right now. And you can just fly around it, look inside it, go up top of it, and you can pick out the house you want without having to even ever go there. And it's completely doable. This stuff is amazing. And we just didn't touch on it, but that's a mobile level type of VR that is currently available and not complicated. Like they do this now. It's amazing.
When they brought Skycam to arenas,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
The hovering camera that brought you to quarterback.
You should be able to log into that thing, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I mean,
mean,
that's the
why not?
evolution of it, right?
It's
Have a
amazing,
drone right behind,
Yeah.
and you get that footage. With the advance of the hardware, right, and the capture mechanism, it starts to become
great.
really intriguing. And when the 3D cameras get put on the Skycams,
Mm-hmm.
right, that's when you're going to start, I think, to really see some cool adoption and people wanting to come in and see what that's like.
Yeah, that's very interesting. There's so many different use cases, especially with mobile, that it's amazing. I've seen too with different glass companies that are doing, not to the scale of like Microsoft HoloLens, but Epson. They're looking at drones as a great way to use AR and get that kind of almost like that magic window VR kind of look to see what's going on, since you have to be able to pilot it as well.